Today on John Davis True Crime, we're going over the case of Kyron Horman. June 4th, 2010. Kyron Horman was eager to get to school that day. See, that is the day that Kyron would be bringing his science fair project to school, and he had done his science fair project on the red-eyed tree frog. Now, Kyron couldn't bring his science fair project on the bus. It was too bulky, and along with his books and all this other stuff, just couldn't do it. So Terry was going to take him to school that morning. Now that's Terry Horman, Kyron's stepmother. Now Terry Horman would tell us she took Kyron to school that day. They went in, they set up Kyron's project, they took a little time to look around at the other projects, and she even snapped a photo of Kyron in front of his project. And if you see Kyron in the picture, he's just beaming. Kyron's a happy guy with his red-eyed tree frog science fair project. Terry says, after they do all this, Kyron's got to get on to class. So Terry walks Kyron up the stairwell to the second floor, steps out of the stairwell, and even watches Kyron walk down the hallway until he's really close to his classroom before she turns around and leaves the school. Now, fast forward into the school day, the school bus pulls up. Kyron's dad, Kane, and Terry, Kyron's stepmom, are there at the bus stop. The bus pulls up, the kids get off. Kyron don't get off the school bus. Kane asks the bus driver, where's Kyron at? He says Kyron wasn't on the bus. Kane calls the school, finds out how Kyron missed the bus or what's happened, and he's shocked to find out that they tell him Kyron was absent. Kyron wasn't even at school that day. Now, there's an interesting little side note to this. It turns out Terry Horman, Kyron's stepmom, she had told the school that Kyron would be absent. She had done that like a few days prior. She had called and told him Kyron had a doctor's appointment. He wouldn't be there on this day. However, she tells us she got the days mixed up because his doctor's appointment was actually the following week. Now, the problem with that is the following week, school was going to be out for summer break already. So there'd be no reason to call the school to tell them Kyron wouldn't be there because it'd already be out for summer break. It's just a little side note that is troublesome. It makes you wonder if that might have been an attempt to kind of delay the reaction of realizing Kyron was missing. But we move on. Now, after Kane finds out Kyron's missing, he calls the police. They start searching immediately. They go and they start searching from the school out. Now, they go all out on this search. They got helicopters, ATVs, horseback, ground searchers, dogs, you name it, they got it. Forward infrared looking radar to pick up body heat signatures. Because in Kyron's case, it's a little more dire that he's missing than it would be for a normal kid. Kyron had really poor eyesight, and without his glasses, Kyron can barely see at all. And Desiree, Kyron's mom, would go on to tell us later that Kyron's biggest fear was to get lost and not be able to find his way home. Now, there was one thing that they thought could possibly have made this a stranger abduction, and that was the science fair. Because they had kind of slacked on the signing in and out and that kind of stuff that day because the science fair was going on and there'd be a lot of extra people coming in and out because of that. However, they soon kind of squashed that, decided, that they didn't think this was a case of a stranger abduction. There just wasn't no evidence of it, and it just seemed to go nowhere. So then you got to go back and look at who was the last person to see Kyron, and that would be Kyron's stepmother, Terry Horman. Now, police would go on to question Terry Horman, and they would want her to give a timeline of her day. Well, Terry would tell them, some stops she made and some places she went, and they would go on to check those, and it turned out she was telling the truth. She had been to a few stores and I think a pharmacy, things like that. The problem with Terry's timeline, though, is it has a big gaping 2-hour hole in it. And Terry explained the hole as she was riding around with her daughter who had a bad earache, she says, and she was trying to soothe her and put her to sleep because she was, really agitated over the earache and she was fussy and all this. So she thought a good drive in the country would help clear that up. Now, police would go on to polygraph Terry, and Terry would go on to fail the polygraphs. She failed 2 of them, and a third one she just stormed up and walked out of. We got a clip.
And the polygraph operators have reported that you failed the first 2 polygraphs and that you walked out in frustration on the third before it really got going.
Now, after Terry's failed polygraphs, there's also some other things that we learn. We learn that Terry has a friend. Now, as they're going into Terry's background, and they get into her circle of friends, and they find out Terry has a friend. This friend's name is Dee Dee Spicer. Now, Dee Dee Spicer, coincidentally, on the same day Kyron went missing, happened to be MIA from work for about 90 minutes. And her co-workers seemed to be really shocked by that. They said she was just gone, hadn't told anybody where she was going or anything like that, and she was missing for about 90 minutes. And it kind of fit in. The 90 minutes that she was missing was at the tail end of Terry's 1.5 to 2-hour hole in her alibi. So it almost makes you think that whatever Terry had started, Dee Dee was finishing. That's just my opinion. It seems really suspicious. And another thing about Dee Dee and Terry is police learned that after they began investigating Dee Dee and Terry, Dee Dee had went to the store and purchased some burner phones. And the reason you purchase burner phones is because you don't want the police to hear what you're talking about. They were afraid their phones were tapped, so they got them some burner phones so they could talk without worrying about law enforcement overhearing what they were saying. Now, that's extremely suspicious behavior. Now, a while after Kyron's disappearance, Kyron's biological mother, Desiree Young, and Kyron's dad, Kane Horman, and Kyron's stepmom, Terry Horman, would have a press conference asking for help to find Kyron. And the reporters at this press conference described this as having a very eerie vibe to it. And I think what they were talking about was, if you watch the press conference, Terry Horman is crying on Desiree's shoulder, and Desiree, you can tell, is really uncomfortable with Terry being that close to her and on her. Because I think at this point, Desiree already had a lot of suspicion about Terry. Now, next we find out that Desiree Young has really been fed up, and she's wanting to get answers about what happened to Kyron. So what she decided to do was she would file a civil suit against Terry in hopes of finding out what had happened to Kyron. Now, when the civil suit was filed, they subpoena people. One of the people that got a subpoena was Terry's good friend, Dee Dee Spicer. And we come to find out Dee Dee Spicer refused to answer over 140 questions.
What do you think about Dee Dee Spicer refusing to answer 140 questions, over 140 in her deposition?
Trying to have them.
You don't want. How is there that many questions you would not be willing to answer?
Yeah, that's just crazy.
I bet one of them was, where was you the day, Dee Dee, that Kyron disappeared for an hour and a half in the middle of your work day? You think that was one of the questions?
Now that says a lot. Also, we found a lot of interesting things out about Terry too, such as Terry had some inappropriate texting going on shortly after Kyron's disappearance. I'll play you a little clip.
Me. Okay, I didn't want to ravish you or anything. Insert evil grin with latex. Whoops, did I say that out loud? If you didn't-
And last but not least, and I just found this out recently, and I don't know if a lot of people have seen this or not. Years after Kyron's disappearance, an author wrote a book about Kyron. And in this book, the author told us something that we did not know at the time. When Kyron went missing that morning, there were 4 witnesses that say they seen Terry Horman walking to the parking lot to leave the school with Kyron.
It's multiple adults that can vouch for the fact that Terry walked out the side entrance of the school with Kyron in tow.
But the one that was failed was whether or not he was in the truck with me.
Hey, I wanted to make sure everybody understood that, okay? Now, you had all those witnesses that said they seen Terry leave with Kyron that day. And the question Terry admits to failing on the polygraph was Kyron in the truck that day when you left? Coincidence? I think not.
Now, one of those witnesses was Kyron's regular bus driver. Now, you know a regular bus driver would have no problem identifying Kyron. And Kyron's regular bus driver was one of the people who said they seen Kyron leaving the school with Terry. Now, there was another witness who was Kyron's classmate. And Kyron's classmate had 2 family members, and all 3 of them stated they seen Kyron leaving with Terry the morning of the science fair. I really hope we can get some justice for Kyron, and I hope maybe this video will help. I'd like to ask everybody, share this video. Let's try to drum up some heat on the police, because I think we all know who is responsible for Kyron's disappearance. And the story about Kyron having a big fear of not being able to find his way home breaks my heart. And I hope whoever's responsible for Kyron not being home is brought to justice, and I hope that happens really soon.
Like, subscribe, comment, and share.